Hi, my name is Maria Lloyd with FinancialJuneteenth.com, and today I'm having a very exciting conversation with two of my favorite people. They're business consultants and they're authors of 101 Ways to Make Money in Africa. Their names are Dr. Harnett and John Paul. How are you guys doing?
Very well, thank you. Good to be back.
Yes, well, we are very excited to have you two back. And today we're going to discuss my favorite thing. It's the reason why my cheeks are big. Agriculture. Agriculture. So investing in agriculture on the motherland. So I want to open up this conversation basically just asking you two, why is agriculture a sector that someone should consider investing in Africa?
Right. Well, first of all, agriculture is really has been a key sector in Africa, for decades or centuries. The African economies at large are based on the agricultural sector. I mean, in some countries, they contribute up to 40% of GDP to some of the nations,
wow,
which is huge. However, most of them run on subsistence basis, or not a lot of it has been commercialized. So this means the agricultural sector will be absolutely the main sector in Africa that will, first of all, feed a fast-rising population. Second, provide jobs to the main segments of Africa's population, because they are involved in agriculture. And so for this reason, it's really a sector that will be rising fast. In fact, it is predicted by Ernst & Young that it will be the second fastest growing sector in Africa.
Wow.
After fast-moving consumer products. So it used to be the mining in the past. Africa was very well known for mining.
Right.
And yes, but now it will be the fast-moving consumer products, where food will be a part of, and it will be the agricultural sector. So these are really the two top sectors in Africa.
Wow. John Paul, did you want to add anything?
Okay, yeah. Food is so fundamental to human existence that it's almost impossible, if not impossible, to exist without food. I remember the chapter in the book that concerns food starts with this very interesting quote. It says, it's by MFK Fisher. It says, first we eat, and then we do everything else. And that's exactly true.
That is true.
So if you don't eat, a lot of other things that our lives depend upon will not happen, So that's what our body feeds on. Now, why is food important for Africa? I wouldn't want to answer that face on, but I just want to give you a few pointers. You have a continent of 1-point-something billion people. They wake up every day, they yawn, and next thing they want to eat. They expect to eat 3 times a day. They expect to eat 3 times a day, in the morning, in the afternoon, and in the evening. And it's no longer the basic kind of foods. People are not getting more sophisticated with their choices. Interestingly, now in the book, the chapter on food has the longest, the most sections in it. That's to tell you how huge, how complex, and how eclectic it is, the industry, because there are lots of things that depend on food. Another interesting thing, let me use one simple example, bread. Bread is so important in the African diet. I think why it's so important is because I think it's the cheapest food. No matter how poor you are, you can afford bread. Now, wait for this. In 2013, Nigeria alone spent $1 billion to import wheat from the USA.
Wow.
They spent 1.7 billion. In fact, the food bill concerning wheat is so huge that it's given the government a problem, and they've been looking for substitutes. That's why things like cassava have come in. And I believe Dr. Harnett and I are going to touch on that. That's one simple example. So the continent as a whole, at least at the minimum, spent, say, 10 billion on wheat alone.
Wow.
I don't even want to go into milk. Milk. The government still spends, Africa still spends millions of dollars to import milk, and then there are juice concentrates, and then there's processed foods, and then there are lots of other things that we can't even go into right now. So food is so important because one, human lives depend on it. Two, because it's a huge, huge industry. And interestingly, Africa is very suited for, agriculture. It has the land, it has a suitable climate, it has the human resources to make it happen. It has the consumption power of over 1 billion people. So it's so huge we can't even start to, I don't think this one session will be enough to exhaust food. It's huge.
Wow.
Huge and huge.
I absolutely agree with John Paul. I mean, it is already huge when you're just looking at the African continent on its own. But really, about 40% of the world's arable land that has not been used yet is in Africa, on that one continent.
Wow.
And the world needs to eat too. And a lot of places in the world, are already quite crowded or overused in terms of agricultural production. So it's also world players that look towards Africa now to source their food. So it is absolutely, as John Paul said, it is huge, both within the African market, the intra-African trade market, as well as at a global level.
Wow, that's amazing. So I guess what I want to ask you now is, I know that, John Paul, you mentioned cassava. Are there any specific or particular foods that you all would recommend if someone were interested in investing in agriculture in Africa? What foods would you all recommend?
Big list. Who goes first? You go first.
I think I should just take this one first. I think the best way to answer that question would be to say everything. But, usually we need to build up to that. Let's ask ourselves, what do Africans eat? We're humans too. We eat exactly the same carbohydrates, proteins, vitamins, veggies, and, stuff like that. So if you look at carbohydrates alone, which is, the biggest component of the diet on the continent, it's not surprising that grains, that category of foods called grains,
Right.
rice, wheat, stuff like that. The import bill for grains in Africa is in billions every year, because it's a major staple on the continent. Now, Africa has its own homegrown foods that can, supplement or even replace those carbohydrate foods. But they're not yet as sophisticated. And usually they come in as tubers, like cassava, yams, things like that.
Right.
The problem with this is that they're highly perishable. So if you harvest cassava or yam, and you don't consume it within a couple of months, or yam, cassava within a couple of days, it starts to deteriorate. So the main problem with Africa, I think, is a lot of foods go to waste. The continent produces a lot, but a lot of it, in fact, it's so bad that a food like tomatoes, Africa produces millions of tons of tomatoes a year. But at certain times of the year, you can't even find tomatoes. They're so expensive because during the harvest, a lot of it was wasted and rotted away. And then off the harvest period, people actually keep paying through their noses to, get this kind of foods. And you go to protein foods. Africa has 15% of the world's, cattle. I was reading something the other day, and there's a report that says the USA supplies the world 25% of its beef. But the US only has 10% of the world's cattle. That's a highly efficient system.
Right.
It has 50% of the world's cattle, but supplies little to nothing,
Right.
It's that bad. So there are just a lot. I think the only way to exhaust it would be, I think our book, does a very good job with that, going in depth into every single category, from grains to veggies to things like tomatoes. In fact, Hannah, I'm going to take this one away from you. You know the whole thing happening about fruits.
Right.
Another interesting part, up to 70% of the fruits consumed in the world are from the tropics, that whole belt from South America to Southeast Asia, so Africa is richly endowed with a lot of those fruits. Say, for example, citrus, oranges, the fruit juice industry is growing massively. Nigeria, for example, I keep thinking of them because It's actually the biggest country on the continent, has the largest population, but it gives you a clear glimpse into the serious inefficiencies in the food system in Africa. So a country like Nigeria produces a surplus of oranges, but still spends more than $200 million every year to import juice concentrates for the juice industry. It's so ironical, it's annoying. You know, how can you produce a lot of oranges, but then you just can't add the extra value to convert it into something more stable that will fetch a lot of money. So the first guy who comes in here and does that, he's getting awards everywhere like it's some celebrity. But it's obvious, you know, oranges, process, make them concentrate. But nobody is doing that.
Right.
And every year we keep spending more and more. So before I just, with food, I can just continue going, but I think I should just hold on at this point and allow Dr. Hannah to chip in.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very, very dynamic market with huge opportunities, both in regards to investment as well as actually going into Africa on the ground and starting something yourself. So it is so huge here that we have to somehow break it down. So first of all, I agree with Jean-Paul there. Some of the basics, and some of them are quite frankly not produced in Africa sufficiently enough. So, for example, as you said, rice gets imported. So the other thing is wheat, rice, and then we have things like oats, for example. Oats is becoming very popular now because we have a fast rising middle class that, you know, gets used to Western style lifestyle, so they want their breakfast cereals and oat snacks, things like that. They want baby food, for example, packaged, and all of that is not available. It gets imported. There's no oats production, or hardly any, in Africa. If you go to the supermarket shelves in most of the cities, even in a vibrant city like Nairobi, let's say, all the baby food, the basic baby food that is made from rice grain or oat grains gets imported, and it sells for something like $5 on a supermarket shelf. I mean, I saw something in Nairobi at a normal supermarket. It was like a baby rice with banana flakes, and that sold for $6. You know?
Wow.
So these are very, very simple production systems where you can either obviously sell it in an unprocessed form, trade it in bigger quantities. But I think the real profit or opportunity lays in value addition. And African governments are really promoting value addition, because the problem in Africa has been and still is that Africa produces and then it just exports its raw materials or its raw produce in agriculture. It doesn't add any value, and then that's exactly what we see is that it exports it and then it imports back the value added goods and it buys that at a very expensive price back from the West. So African governments are very keen now that the value addition takes place on the continent, because number one, more of the money will stay in Africa, but secondly and more importantly, it will also create a lot of jobs that are so badly needed. So therefore, let's say investing or starting a business where you manufacture agricultural produce into food, that is really, it is one of your best bets in Africa right now. And these manufacturing processes don't even have to be very complicated. You know, sometimes when we hear manufacturing, we're thinking of putting a big plant somewhere into the rural areas.
Yes.
We have to invest $200,000 or have $1 million to make it happen. And that's absolutely not the case. We've seen Africans who have really, I mean, obviously, if you have money, you know, go for it. But a lot of people don't have that much. We have seen Africans who have really started from scratch. They have started from scratch in the back there. And so you can start small scale. So if you start small scale, I think what is very, very important is that you are choosing produce that makes you really competitive. And they are, for example, so instead of going for potatoes or carrots, for example, you go for strawberries or mushrooms, something that is hardly produced in Africa. However, in the cities, there's a big demand for it because you have this fast-rising middle class now.
Right.
They want to eat strawberries. They want to eat mushrooms. You have the hotel chains. You have the dairy industry that wants to produce strawberry yogurt. No one is producing it. In Kenya, people who are producing strawberries are selling within 2-3 hours the entire produce.
Wow.
So you just need to find the right niche.
Wow, well, that was a very powerful closing. You guys, as usual, offered really rich information. For those of you who are watching or listening to this, you can actually speak with Dr. Harnett and John Paul yourself. They have a package, and the link is going to be in the bottom of this video, of course, in the description, and the corresponding article to this video. But you can actually speak to them yourself. So all of this information that you're hearing now, I mean, obviously, they've given us a lot of information, but if you really want to pinpoint and decide on how you want to invest in agriculture or any other sectors throughout the continent of Africa, you can actually speak with them one-on-one. Well, thank you both. I mean, again, I'm very appreciative of the great information you guys are giving our readers and our listeners and viewers. And for those of you who are tuning in, thank you for joining us. We will have this conversation again next week, covering a different sector that you may be interested in investing in. So Dr. Harnett and John Paul, as usual, thank you all so much for the information.
Pleasure. It was my pleasure.
And for you, the listener or the reader or the viewer, thank you for tuning in again. And please stick around next week when I bring John Paul and Dr. Harnett again on camera to discuss another sector. Take care.